There are no shortcuts to getting highly coveted press coverage for your brand, only smart cuts like the DIY PR project. Learn how to grow your brand's credibility with PR on a budget with me by your side. This program is your all-in-one membership with expert training, customizable templates, and a supportive community to cheer you on every step of the way. Join us and start growing your business with free publicity today. Sign up now at diy-pr.com. Welcome back to Grow Your Wealth. I'm your host, Reena Goodwin, and today's episode is a must listen for anyone who's ever wondered if their website is working as hard as they are. Joining me is the talented Skylar Sustin, a branding expert and web designer who helps service-based providers elevate their online presence to reflect the true value of their business. In this episode, Skylar and I dive into the psychology of branding, the power of storytelling, and why your website is more than just a digital storefront. It's a tool for connection and growth. Let's get started. Skylar, it is so great to meet you and to have you on the Grow Your Wealth podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
It's great to have you. Skylar, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what do you do?
Yeah, so I am a branding and web designer, and the world into that pretty much stemmed from a background in social media management and coaching. So very different sides of the coin. I was building up a different business with coaching for a while, and I had been doing a lot of social media management on the side, and some of the clients that I had for social media were like, hey, do you know how to build a website? Because we need one. And I was like, I have absolutely no idea, but I can try, give it a shot, see what happens. And it was something that over time ended up being one, the initial was I was really good at it and it just came so naturally, but I pretty much put it on the back burner as I was trying to go and work towards other things. And then another opportunity to create a website came up, and the experience of doing it was something that really allowed me to enter that creative flow and feel there was such a palpable difference between what I was really, really trying to make work and almost what was very naturally coming to me to step into with the websites. So that's kind of the shortened version of how I got to where I am now with doing the branding and websites.
That's really, really interesting. I think your process for building a website is really fascinating as well, too. At FACTEUR, we do some light website builds, but I've worked with, so many website designers over the course of my career. And I like your process a lot because I feel like websites in many ways, I think, are a great opportunity to really showcase your brand and go behind the scenes of who you are. But nevertheless, I think we see more bad websites, quite frankly, than we see really good websites, because it just feels like a sheet of paper, very two-dimensional and kind of talking at you versus bringing you in. Tell us a little bit about how your process is different, so really starting with that brand psychology that you talk about.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely would agree that there are so many websites that still look like they were built in 1999. And it's where is this connection here? Right. So when we're talking about brand psychology that you're saying that I implement a lot of the times, the main foundation of it is, allowing the connection side to come through on your website and to have that be the main factor that is helping one engage visitors, potential clients, but also help grow your business in whatever, that kind of ultimate call to action is. And so when we're using and implementing brand psychology, it's really behind this idea of who is your ideal client and how can we create a space on your website that fully nurtures that specific person and helps them feel so understood that the trust for your business really gets built. Because like you said, when it's a very like two-dimensional, like outdated website, there's a lot of distrust that ends up happening there, because it can almost feel like if your website's outdated, are your services outdated? Like, are you able to really help me if what you're communicating on your website isn't really showcasing what you say you're doing? So the implementation of brand psychology really helps someone understand how they are the right person for what your, business is offering, and also allows them to connect on that deeper level. So you're not just like selling, but you're actually like allowing them to connect with you.
Ooh, I love that so, so much. It was something that I think we subconsciously took into consideration when we just redesigned our website earlier this year. And granted, we did it in-house, but something
Yeah.
that was so important to us is, or I should say, yeah, is slash was making sure that not only the way that we were kind of communicating and portraying our business on the website came across, but that
Yeah.
for those that kind of stumbled upon us, attracted the right businesses to work with us too. And
Yeah.
like how do you find that to be, in terms of designing a website, like what are those key elements that really kind of serve double duty? They
Mm.
communicate, and add value in some way to the visitor, but then also draws them in as a potential customer or client too.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is definitely all of the different branding elements. So, like your colors, your fonts, a logo, like all of those main things that you think about when you're like wanting to think of and brainstorm, okay, what is the kind of persona I want my business to have so that it can communicate the emotions, the values, the mission, all those things that I want to have. Other things that I think aren't looked at as much are like even when it comes to like different shapes that you have on your website. Like one thing that I always think about a lot is the type of shape I put pictures in. And so like I feel like a square is a very like square, rectangle, it's a very basic way to put a picture. But if your like brand is really focused on like wholeness and community and connection or all those type of things, like a square is going to communicate like something very different than like a circle would for that type of business. And so even the
Oh.
type of like flows that you put on your website, or the shapes, or like the flow from section to section, like do you want it to, and this is very different how flexible you can be based on the platform you're on as well, but like a section that just ends and like all of them are just rectangles is very different than if you were to have like a little wave in your section, or some type of different design. And so there are so many different elements that allow you to tap into this ultimate persona that you want your business to have, but also the emotions and experience you want your ideal client to really have while interacting with your brand when it comes to your website.
That makes a lot of sense. And I never really thought of it that way as well. I think to that point, there is a lot of subconscious element that we, whether
Yeah.
we recognize it or not, are feeling when we do visit a website, especially one, if we're looking for, particular product, a particular service. Tell me a little bit about the storytelling side of it too, because I feel like
Mm,
that could be a really big part of it. And, working on the PR side of things, storytelling is everything, but so many
right.
people really struggle to tell that story. What are some creative ways to kind of crack that nut as a designer and developer? How do you work with your clients on developing that story?
Yeah, I think one of the most impactful questions that I normally ask clients when developing their brand and then strategizing the website is, what parts of your story does your ideal client need to hear?
Mm.
Because there's a big, difference between our story as it is what we think people need to hear and what they actually need to hear. And what I find a lot of times, when I'm like writing copy or, taking a lot of considerations into how to tell someone's story on their website, people are much more matter of fact when they're sharing their story, or it comes off in a way that's a lot more, this is who I am, this is what I do, but not really relating it to anything. Or a lot of times what I'll see is like the story people think is only for an about page and it doesn't extend to the rest of the website. And so when I ask that question of what parts of your story does your ideal client need to hear, it becomes less about what the person feels like they need to share and more of how can I share this in a way that's actually going to benefit people and show them the value of what I do. And so when it comes to their website, again, that story isn't that it does not just end on the about page, and it doesn't just end in your copy. Your story can be told throughout every single one of those design elements. Like a big example that I have is I had a client where she was a coach, and her big thing is, transformation for midlife women. And one, she wanted the sunset to be a big element of her brand. And so we implemented that into her color scheme. But one part of the storytelling is the way that those colors show up on the website to actually mimic the sunset, so that almost like as you would see the sunset, like top to bottom, like how those colors would kind of fade, like that is the same way that we set up the colors to tell the story in a different way of this, the way that we were comparing what she does to the sunset or the sunrise, and kind of that natural experience that's mimicked in nature. And so that's a version of that storytelling through design, where we're taking a piece of that story that we feel is really important in communicating what she does and allowing subconsciously, very minimally, very something that not most people will pick up on, but still has an impact in the full vision with the way that those colors show up, because people will see it and they will automatically think of a sunset, and then they'll start to feel the emotions that come when you see a sunset, and then those are what they'll start to feel and associate with the brand, is those same feelings that a sunset would feel. And so that's that story of, how do I want my story to be told? What does someone need to hear from me? And how can we create that in certain elements of design to allow people to associate those same feelings?
I love that, because I feel like part of what you're talking about is showing, not just telling. As part of like your storytelling is also kind of like story showing, if you would.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Cause it's I've never actually thought about it that way, in the way that you're wording it, but it really is not just about like telling someone the story, but actually like showcasing that. When you think about like the most impactful stories too, it's not like you just say like, this happened at this time, this is what happened at that time, and blah, 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 all the rest. But it's like you paint the picture. And so that's ultimately what the websites are trying to do.
That's so interesting. And it kind of reminds me too of, there's a lot of noise out there, Skylar, I feel like, at least in my universe, where, speaking of entrepreneurs, especially new entrepreneurs, business owners, freelancers, what have you, there's a lot of noise about like, you don't need a website. You just need to get started. Yeah. Use your Instagram channel, your TikTok, etc. too. Maybe I'm old school, because I have always thought that having a kind of home base on the web, right, so to speak, is super important, because as someone that does social media as well too, I recognize social media as more of like a distribution channel rather than a place that you own, right? Like TikTok could go down. I mean, it might get banned. Instagram might go offline or get bought out, or there's just so many variables, and that's the internet for you, right? This could certainly happen to your website as well too, although seemingly less likely. But even from like a PR perspective, like when I'm pitching brands or marketing brands, if you're selling something, you kind of need a website as well too. But do you
Yeah.
find that in your universe, like, has there been any pullback from the website? Just even like, is that conversation still happening out there? And what would you say to those people that are like, I can do without a website or a new website for a while?
Yeah, it's definitely still a conversation that I've heard. And then what I
No.
find, yeah, what I find a lot of times though is kind of the mindset I for business owners is kind of interesting because it's not necessarily that you don't need a website, but it's more of like they see a website as like we see this because obviously I'm a business owner too, and I've thought this before. Like, we see a website as a rite of passage into having a business, right? We see it as kind of that in order to have a legit business, some type of online website presence needs to be had. But usually, with that mindset comes, I can just really quickly do it myself, and then that way I have something up. But what ends up happening down the line, which is end up where I end up finding a lot of my clients, is where they're realizing that that mindset, that like I just need a website to have a website, isn't actually helping their business grow because it was literally DIY'd to the point of I just need to get something up here. And the difference between that and, actually having it professionally done or really sitting down and creating intention behind the website like we're talking about is the difference between like just saying who you are and what you do, right? And almost like having those outdated websites and showcasing a part of your business that doesn't actually represent it consistently. Because, like, if we're focusing on social media, like a lot of people do these days more than websites, if that Instagram is inconsistent with the website, it's inconsistent with the way you present yourself on networking calls, and speaking engagements, whatever that may be, people are going to get really confused and they're going to have this like experience of distrust when you're still having that outdated website or you don't have a website. And I don't know about you, but I have never been in a space where I've not been asked for my website. And networking in even like in like trying to do podcasts, um all of that, people still ask for your website because they want to get a feel for you. They want to get a feel for who you are. And like you said, social media is more of like an output. It's, a place to give value. It's a place where people can see a little bit more of a personal side of you. But when it really comes down to it, your website is basically your virtual home. And the way that people experience that home is going to be a really big impact to how they perceive you. So if you think you don't need a website, but you're still, or you have an old website, but you're still feeling like website anxiety around it because like it's not consistent with where you're actually going, then there's a big problem because not only is the website impacting you, but your perception of your business is ultimately also being impacted.
Oh, I love that. I mean, like, louder for the people in the back, right? We need to hear that because first impressions are so important. Right? Like, so in terms of discoverability, social media is a great avenue for a lot of businesses, podcasts like
Mhm.
this, but I think to your point, they've got to land somewhere and they have to have a very clear path to that next step. And I
Right.
know that even on your website, you do discuss that quite a bit. I mean, what is the most important page on the website? That home page, right?
Mhm.
And thinking about taking the visitor where you want them to go. How do you work with your clients on that? Because I know you work a lot with other brands, businesses, coaches, personalities in the wellness space. So there's also this
Mhm.
balance, I'm sure, that they want to take in terms of, offering something of value, but then also asking for something in return, whether that be fill out this form, follow us on social, what have
Yeah.
you. What does that path look like?
Yes, that is kind of the connection and bridge of the strategy side of web design. Like I think up till this point we talked a lot about the like psychology, the storytelling, the fun design aspects, but there is a lot of strategy that goes behind it because in order for, we all have a goal for our website, whether it's I want to convert more clients, I want people to sign up for my events, I want people to go to my blog and read those. Like there are different purposes that we all have based off of our business structure and ultimately what our goals, our big long-term goals are for our business. And so basically, when we are creating this strategy for our websites, it also comes down to what is it like the ultimate call to action that you want to bring your client or potential clients or visitors or whatnot to, and how can we kind of build a path for that? So if someone's big thing is they want some people to like book a connect call through their website, then there are so many different elements of like, you can put a little button on the header that says like book a connect call, or, all of your different pieces of copy on your homepage can be a different element of storytelling in order to have that call to action that leads to that later on. And so it's basically like having this big goal and vision in mind for where you want to lead people to, and then structuring the different design based off of what we talked about already to help move people in that direction. And no matter what place they navigate to, like what that kind of journey becomes, because it can look very different for every person. Someone can go to the homepage and click a button, or someone could go through the homepage, not care, I'll go straight to the about page. There are so many different ways. So it's consistently creating that opportunity for people to navigate to that big thing that you want them to navigate to, and kind of telling the story to lead them to be more engaged or excited to kind of click that button towards what they want.
That makes a lot of sense. And probably also that understanding too, if I'm not mistaken, that, the beauty of website design in particular, website development, is that you can also change things, right? So if people aren't clicking as you thought they were, they're taking a different path. Do you work with your clients as well on, kind of like that A/B testing, identifying what does work, what's maybe not working as well? What are some of the tweaks that you see a lot of these clients making, or you making for them on your behalf, as they start to like learn how their new website's working?
Yeah, I find a lot of times the biggest shifts that end up happening for people are messaging. Because when they get, we do a lot of work to get very clear on messaging, but businesses evolve. Like, no matter how clear you get, I think that when we do sit down to do that intentional branding and web design work, that there's a lot less shift that happens down the line, as opposed to people who kind of like DIY their website up front, don't do branding, and then there's a lot of shifts that happen. But no matter kind of what process you take, there's going to be some type of business evolution. And so I find a lot of times that messaging needs to shift. Like, so that comes down to more of the copy side of things, which I have as part of like my web design packages. And another thing that I noticed too is sometimes that big goal becomes different. So the vision usually always stays the same for people in their business, why they're doing it, what they want from it. But the goals to get there usually change down the line. So sometimes that looks like at the beginning, you just want to book like one-on-one clients and you want to bring people to a connect call. But then maybe you're doing those one-on-ones and you've done a few workshops and you're like, I really like group calls a lot better and I'm totally done with one-on-one. So the goal changes then. Instead of like, I want to work and help people one-on-one, the goal becomes I want to create group atmospheres so that I can still help people in that way, but I can also expand it to where there's a community that's being built. So when those goals, when those shifts, when those ways of approaching your ultimate vision change, that's usually when things on the website need to be altered, because in order to stay consistent in the business that you're building, the website needs to help continue to evolve and support that. I'm glad you asked this too, because there's so many times that I see like people's business evolving and our websites being left behind. And it becomes really hard because then we start to kind of lose the connection, like there's a different type of feeling when all of our elements are connected and there's so much more clarity on the vision and the path to get to where we want to go, as opposed to if one of those branches, like, social media or website, or, the way that you're talking about what you do becomes, falls to the back end, then it creates that, like, again, like we talked about earlier, a lack of clarity. And so continuing to help your business, your website evolve as your business evolves, kind of in that way, when, you want to add a new service, you want to change the goal, you want to change the approach, because that's all really important to consider in terms of how can I shift this on the website. And that's what I find a lot of people, like, after projects are over, or even when they come to me for the first time and they're kind of in that place of wanting to, like, shift things.
I love that. And thank you for answering that question because, I don't necessarily believe, right, if you build it, they will come. And that it's, especially as business owners, like anytime we sort of reach a milestone, like, okay, new website's up
Yeah.
and running. It's not that you'll never have a new website ever again, or you'll just sort of abandon it. And to be honest with you, I think we already touched on this a little bit, but like there are so many websites out there that just kind of feel abandoned. And
Yeah.
I think maybe one of the ways I personally see as a missed opportunity for a lot of emerging brands and businesses is leveraging their website as a place to help kind of build community. I think we talk a
Mm-hmm.
lot about building community on social. And again, we're not here to poo poo social media. Social media is really important. But if you really do have a true community, it should be able to move with you, right? If
Mm-hmm.
it's your community. And because your website is arguably yours, Instagram is not ours. We're kind of like borrowing their audience, so to speak. And you want to take a community with you, maybe off social media to a place like a website. What does that look like? Like, is this even a thing, first of
Mm.
all? And like, what does that look like if it is?
Yeah, I've heard a very similar thing when it comes to, like, newsletters. Like, I've heard people talk about, like, like making sure to focus on that too, because you never know when, like, your social media might get hacked or the platform's going to go down, and, like, you need a way to connect still with people. And it's funny because at one point before I became a web designer, I thought, oh, maybe I just need my Instagram, right? I've been that person too, and I realized that, like, to one extent, your social media can mimic what's on your website, but I don't think it can fully embody what a website does, um, because, like you're saying, it allows you to continue to showcase yourself and what you do in a way that social media might not if something shifts with it. And I mean, another thing is, I know this can be a very, like, scarce mindset too, like, oh my gosh, I have to make sure I do all these things just in case. And I think it really comes down to, like, as a business owner, there are different things that'll work for each of us, but different things that we want to do. And there are a lot of people I've met that social media is a drag. And it's really hard for a lot of people to stay consistent and updated and, do posts and show their face and everything. And I think that a website helps ease the burden. And a lot of times when people put such a harsh focus on social media, it's because their website isn't in a place they feel excited and confident about. And
Mm.
so for people who have a lot of pressure on social media and they're feeling a lot of resistance to it, it might be helpful to shift the focus and look at, okay, how can I improve my website so that, one, the messaging and the approach to social media is so much more clear to me that it doesn't feel as resistant. And I almost think of, like, social media as, like, and again, this depends on the type of business that you're in, because social media is more important for different types of businesses and, different business plans and all of that. Um, But I almost see like social media is a great addition to your business if it feels right for you and if it feels like the thing that's going to help you move the needle. If it doesn't, you can be just as effective with networking and a website, right? Like it's really like what's best for you, and then also noticing like how can I get more clear on all these foundational sides of my business, which a website helps with, to be able to expand into that other layer of social media so that one, I'm not coming off as inconsistent, but two, I'm actually allowing it to be beneficial to me when I'm in it and I'm not like hating it or being like, oh, why do I have to do this? Because that's a lot of people's feelings towards it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, from back to like public relations, from a PR perspective, in some ways having it will let me back up a little bit. From a PR perspective, depending on what type of business that you have, sometimes having a website is actually a little bit more important than, a big blossoming social media presence because a website and very similar to social media can act as kind of like a portfolio, like
Right.
a quick stop to get to know you. And especially if something like media coverage is important to you, that's where we
Mm-hmm.
send journalists. It's tough to send journalists like,
Yeah.
check out this post or check out these five
Yeah.
posts. And this one talks about like, this one goes into what we do. This one's a little bit about me. It's like, okay, just go to the website. The website has
Yeah.
everything that you need. And, particularly if you're like a brick and mortar business, I mean, you absolutely then have to have a website just in terms of like SEO and such. And, I mean, I'm sure you find like, Google, Bing, whatever are driving a lot of traffic, if not the majority of traffic to most websites. Speaking about strategy, how important is optimizing your website for SEO? And for those of us
Mm.
out there who are like, what are you talking about? Can you explain what SEO is and why it's important to make sure to have your website optimized for search engines?
Yeah, it's actually interesting. I'm a little bit different than most designers in terms of SEO because I
Mm.
actually don't focus on it like in what I do because my big approach, if there's someone who really really wants SEO on their website, I usually will bring in like a partner with me. But for me, I SEO is something that I think is more important when you have like blogs on your website. I think that's the most important part of using SEO and where it really comes through. And I think it also depends on how big your business is and kind of what your like ultimate goal is. Because again, like if you're wanting clients and you're kind of a smaller business, like, or you're like a coach, SEO, I don't think will have as big of an impact. But if you're, someone who's a lot more localized or like you're, like brick and mortar or you're someone who wants to have a lot more local clients, I think that's where SEO comes a lot more into play. But for me personally, I love focusing more on the experience of when someone gets to that website, right? So there's social media. Social media is I think a version of it's not SEO, but it's a version of like people finding you and finding a website. I think networking is also a version of people going and finding your website. And so one, I know SEO is a big topic for business owners and it's like, "Oh my God, how do I do this? What do I do?" And so I think also understanding again, what are those long-term goals? Where are you wanting to find your clients? Is it through Google? Is it networking? Like, is it social media? And also, what are the type of clients you want? Like, do you want to have someone that will build a little bit more connection with you first? Or are you wanting to just like have anyone and anyone, like everyone and anyone come to your website? There's so many different ways of approaching like the way that we can optimize our website and bring people to it. And to me, I find the most effective is actually building out the website platform to be able to host people when they come to your website, because you can have a million people come and not one do anything because of the way that your website is set up design wise and the way that it implements all the elements that we talked about. And so I really love focusing on this aspect because I think so many people focus on SEO and they don't always consider how to keep people on the website once they're there. So I know it's not exactly answering the question, but I don't consider myself an SEO expert anyway, so I don't want to try and say things that I don't have the answers to. But that's a little bit of like my approach to that world of web design.
I certainly understand that. I mean, I've like so many people have Googled a business, for example, and a website will come up and you land on the website and you can tell that it was designed for SEO, not for the visitor, right? Because it is just like, pardon me, a hot mess. Like it's just like you can tell it's just like bleeding keywords where it's like, for example, I live in Cincinnati and it would be like Cincinnati yoga, the best Cincinnati yoga, one-stop shop for all your Cincinnati yoga needs. And you're like, okay, can you just give me the hours? Like, wait, like I'm here for one thing, but you are still trying to optimize that website. And it turns out to look very cluttered. It's probably built on not, I'm not personally a big WordPress fan, although people say it's great for SEO, but I think that either. In terms of I'm glad I'm not alone when people are like, can you do this on WordPress? I'm like, why? I'm sorry. And, but there's ways to optimize a website for SEO that are not on WordPress. But anyway, I digress. And, it's just exactly as you said, like the SEO brings them in, but it doesn't keep them because by the time they get to that site, we've bounced, right? We're like, I don't know what my next step is supposed to be. I'm now confused. I'm overwhelmed. Oh my God, is that Flash? Like, it's just it's a lot on the eyes and it starts to become a little bit confusing. But for those that are coaches, because I know you've worked as a coach yourself, you work with a lot of coaches. I'm also just kind of curious too, Skylar, websites are such a great place too. If you've got something like a lead magnet, right? So, while we might warm up an audience on social, bring them to our website, share our story, but the visitor is not necessarily ready to purchase. How important are lead magnets? Like, I feel like everyone has them now. And maybe for good reason. What are your thoughts around that?
I love lead magnets. But I think that again, I think a lot of us just have them to have them, again, without a strategy behind it. Which is something I'm guilty of when I was coaching. Like that was kind of my approach to it. And I think it's really easy in that niche, in that industry to, just try to get out all the freebies you can, but then not have a way of like actually, what happens when someone has the freebie or like, what do I do now? I personally love using freebies, or lead magnets as a way to build community and dive a little bit deeper with people. And so what I find a lot of like people in the coaching industry do is they'll have some type of lead magnet and then that kind of ends there and they kind of expect people to have that and then be like, oh wow, this is the best thing in the world, how do I work with them? When realistically it's almost like it's like one step deeper in the warm-up phase is realistically what it is, because your lead magnets are just a deeper way to get people another type of insight into your world and to bring them a little bit deeper in it, especially when you have it connected to like a newsletter where you can send out a sequence with it where you give them more information. Maybe you offer like a call with them or something to allow them to dive in more. But I think there's also a lot of different mindsets around lead magnets. And there's a big difference between a mindset when it comes to, I want this to get clients versus I want this to give more value so that I can nurture more people. Because it's all about like bringing it back to that nurturing and connection. And so also making sure that you have a lead magnet that is actually valuable. Like not everyone I heard a lot of like trash talk on like PDF type like lead magnets. Like there are a lot of people who are like, people don't like those anymore. They don't care. And I'm like, I like them. Like I still get those sometimes, but I think there's a lot of different ways to get creative with it too. Like I love a good like workshop or like masterclass type things. Like I think those are probably the most impactful because not only are people getting more value from you, but they're also getting a feel for you and your personality and the type of things that you do. And so I think the most important when it comes to lead magnets is how can you give people deeper insight into you and the way that you work, and the kind of like mind and the processes that you have. And how can you continue to create some type of nurturing sequence to allow them to dive deeper when they're maybe not ready to go right into working with you after a freebie? Because chances are, if they grab a freebie, they're not going to want to work with you right away. They're not going to be like, okay, this is great. How do I pay? They're still going to need a lot of nurturing to realize the continued benefit and value that you can give to someone and to continually feel that sense of being understood. Because you can give all the value in the world and have all the knowledge, but if you don't produce it in a way that makes people feel understood and actually be able to apply these things to their lives, then that's a very, very different story.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you for sharing that. I have a PDF lead magnet myself too.
I have one too. I have to say, I have one too.
Yes, and I think that's so smart, right? If you are going to have a lead magnet living on your website, making sure that you have an email list, you're continuing to communicate, nurture your audience through that email list. It's such a great marketing tactic. And to your point, helps build that community element, builds
Yeah.
that like, know, and trust factor so that they, understand you a little bit better and may want to work with you, of course, in the future as well, too. So really great advice. So this is a podcast, of course, not just about business, but about wellness as well, too. Skylar, how do you take care of yourself? You're on a desktop for much of the day. I know what
Yeah.
that certainly can do to our mental and our physical health. What does your day to day look like when it comes to taking care of yourself?
Yeah, you're right. I'm on the computer all day, staring at a screen. First thing, blue light glasses changes the game for me.
Mm,
Um, it helped, at
good
least
to
for
know.
me. Yeah, it helps my mind not feel as foggy at the end of the day. Like if I'm staring at a screen for a really long time, then my mind will start to be like, oh, but blue light glasses really help. But I also love a really slow morning. Um,
Mm.
I like easing into my day, and I find that kind of taking time at the beginning to one, nurture myself in however like way I feel like I need to, but also allowing me to kind of be like, okay, what do I feel like doing in this space I have before I go into work, so that I'm listening to what I want and I need at that moment in time, but I'm also like not jumping right into things, which I find really helpful. Movement is a really big one, especially because I am like inside at a desk, like working from home. Like it's really easy to not, get out into the world and then like be inside a lot. So even if it's going for a walk, even if it's going to like a yoga class or whatever, like movement is really big. I find that when I don't do that, I get way more in my head and my creative flow is not as good because I'm not moving and I'm just stuck in the same place. Um, and yeah, I also, another thing for me personally is like I like a slow morning. I also feel like my day is much more complete and fulfilling when I end reading. For me, I love that. That can look like journaling, that can look like meditation, that can look like whatever it is that your hobby or whatever, you like to do. That's like my unwind. So I pretty much like to sandwich the day with things that I really love and enjoy and that make me kind of feel more grounded. So that when I am doing things like this or, kind of getting caught up in the hustle and bustle and not focusing on, my body or what it needs, whatever that looks like. If I sandwich the day, it helps a lot for me because there's always those things that I'm returning back to reground me before I enter back into, whatever the day holds.
That's awesome. And good for you. Good for you. So let this be a sign, this episode be a sign for anyone listening. You might need a new website or a little bit of a refresh. Skylar, where can people find you?
Yeah, so the best way to connect, I am a social media person. I do love Instagram is my favorite. Instagram or Facebook are the two that I'll be on, and those are just my name. So at Skylar Sustin on both of those places. My website is also my name, skylarsustin.com. So if you're interested in, I have that website we're sharing, remember? Like if you do a podcast interview, that's a way to share it. But anyways, yeah, if you Google my name anywhere, all the platforms are that way. But social media to connect, website to learn a little bit more. And yeah.
Awesome. Skylar, it has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much and really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you. I hope this was helpful for everyone. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope this episode deposited some useful advice and insights to help you grow your wealth. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future conversations. You can find more resources, episode details, and updates at growyourwealthpodcast.com. And let's keep the conversation going on Instagram. Follow me at Grow Your Wealth Podcast. I'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, or takeaway from today's show. Until next time, remember, burnout is optional. Take care, and I'll see you next week.